Alec Baldwin, you played Dennis in Loot in 1986. Was that your first encounter with Joe Orton?
In 1986, yes, I did Loot, and Kevin Bacon had done the play at the Manhattan Theater Club, and they moved the show with the same cast, with Zoe and Charles Keating and Mahar and Jelko and Nick Ullett. They came to Broadway. Kevin couldn't go. I replaced Kevin. We did what's called a put-in rehearsal, where they don't have time for you to discover this or discover that. They basically said to me, with apologies, they basically said, well, Kevin did this and Kevin did that, and we asked Kevin to do this. They asked me to just be put in. So I did the show. It was my first Broadway show. I never was on Broadway before, which was a thrill to me. I was just terrified and filled with fear and apprehension. And then I did the play They Gave Me Prick Up Your Ears, and I knew who Lar was, kind of, and of course I knew who his father was. And I went, then eventually I watched the movie with Oldman and Molina. And to go out there, I mean, to me, it was just this idea of a type of comedy that spoke to me, and I don't know why. I don't even care to understand it. I don't want to understand it. And the older I get, I'm like, who cares? Like, if you find out, oh, well, I this and I this. I'd stand there. There was a woman named Peggy Peterson, and I mentioned this in my book. There was a woman named Peggy Peterson who had the stage manager's desk, and she'd call the show with the cues from her table. And many nights, I would stand next to Peggy and just watch the whole show. I just watched the whole show. I couldn't take my eyes off Mahar and Keating, who were such skilled English actors trained here, Zoe, and I would watch them. I could not stop. I couldn't take my eyes off them. The lessons of how to act in the theater and deliver a line. What's that line she has? She said, the father said something about, he said, it's awful. Bank robbers got away with a fortune. Burrowed through the walls, they did. I always remember Charles Keating's reading. Burrowed through the walls, they did. And Jelko would say, and then he says, must have been one of the big gangs. And Jelko said, it was a small gang, minute, he says. Then she says, whatever his line was, but if I got away with that money, if I was one of those robbers, I'd go away on holiday. And she'd say, you are going away on holiday. He goes, I'll go away quicker. And she goes, where would you go? Spain, the playground of international crime. And she goes, where are you going? He says, Portugal. Jelko would look right at her and go, Portugal. I mean, I just couldn't take my eyes off them. I remember these lines and the way they read them. I hear them in my ears. It's over 30 years ago. We did it in 1986. Mahar, I mentioned all this in the book. Mahar, you have before you a man who is quite a personage in his own way. Truscott of the Yard. Or was that before your time? No, he says, he says, I'm the man that apprehended the limbless girl killer. Or was that before your time? He said, who would kidnap a limbless girl? No, she was the killer. He says, come away from the window. No, he says, we're not quite. You want to cooperate with me, boy? I'll see you're all right. I'll put in a good word for you. And Joe would do it, this dripping with sexual deviation. He was like, he goes, you want to cooperate with me, boy? I'll put in a good word for you. I'll see you're all right. He goes, look at me, go. And I go, can we stand away from the window? And like we were about to kiss. Can we stand away from the window? I don't want anybody to see me talking to a police officer. It's just so ridiculous. But I remember all this. And then I went and did before that, I had auditioned to replace Max Caulfield. I was in the replacement part of my career, to replace Max Caulfield for Sloane. And they decided not to extend. And my joke was, well, 25 years from now, I'll do Ed. And exactly 25 years later, from 1981 to 2006, exactly 25 years later, I played Ed. And that was just like the greatest. I'm dying to do that play again. I don't know if anybody would want me to do it again, but I'd love to do it again.
To mark the 50th anniversary of the death of Joe Orton in 2017, you've written a new Edna Wellthorpe letter. Was that fun?
Well, I mean, the thing about it is that's always so intimidating is that, the average English cab driver is closer to Orton in terms of wit and style and the muscularity of their language than compared to what goes on in America. Americans, the old line, two countries separated by a common language. And you go to the United States and that kind of discipline is missing. And that's not the end of the world per se, but when I come over here, it's just thrilling. So when you asked me to do this, my first answer was no, because I thought, I'm not going to expose myself and write the weakest, most anemic Edna Wellthorpe letter compared to everybody else but I'm saying that kind of style and that kind of British crackling thing is just at their fingertips. Everybody here is so funny and so clever. And so smart through their language. And but I took a crack at it because I thought to myself, well, what's something that I am confused or pissed off about or both? And I thought of the tipping idea because in the United States, the issue of tipping, it's not an issue, by the way, but it's a small thing in the background, which is obscured by a bigger thing. And the bigger thing is that they're not paying anybody a living wage. So you go to a store and there's a tip jar there, and what they're basically saying to you now is, we're not paying these girls that are scooping the ice cream any real money. It's up to you to make up the difference. We're charging you $6 for a scoop of ice cream. We're charging you more for a scoop of ice cream than you've ever paid in your life. But we need to keep all that money. That's for us, the owners of that. And the girls here are, so you need to make up the difference and be, step up. And tipping has become supplemental income. And sometimes you sit there and go, well, I'm going to tip you, as you always do in a restaurant where as I said, there's an evaluative component. I joke in the letter, in my own thoughts, which is there's an evaluative component to what someone is doing. I said, but now you're giving people a tip for just performing the basic service itself. So you go into the ice cream shop, per se, and I'm being glib about it, and I almost want to take the money before I put it in the cup and say, now before I put it into the cup, what should I be looking for? Is it some kind of technique you have with your wrist? Is it some sort of an effort you make? Is it, are you going to read me a poem? If I can break out a guitar, will you sing me a song? What's going on? You get the idea. And so I laid all that into my Edna letter and did my level best. How many Edna letters did you compile for this?
10 letters, and we've got the cream of British comedy writers. You're in very good company.
Terrified.
Congratulations on your Emmy Award nomination for your Donald Trump impersonation. Was your encounter with Joe Orton and his particular brand of satire in any way an influence on that?
The answer is yes. It might not be in the way that people would imagine, but the answer is yes, because all that comedy where you play these larger-than-life characters, to watch Mahar in Loot and in Sloane, he'd say to Sloane, he says, I spend my vacations in places where the bints have rings in their noses. The men are like banks, boy. Breaking and entering is a serious business. Give me your word that you're not vaginalatrous. Sloane has no idea what any of this means. He's like, I'm not. No. And everybody played it like a little bit, like right, the cup is brimming, and if you put in one more drop, it would be silly. There's a place you've got to take it. And I learned about comedy from them. I learned from him. I mean, when Mahar would be right close, and you could tell he was so close to Sloane, who was Max Caulfield, who was like this stunningly good-looking guy, and you could tell Joe he wanted to smell him. He'd say, you exercise regular? Yes, I see. He said, you this and that. He said, I'll lift weights, power forward. I'm an all-rounder. I'm a great all-rounder. He said, it'd increase me if you misbehaved again. I got responsibilities. Let him stay. Kid like that. You know what they'll say, don't you? He's cultured, Ed. He's informed. He walks in. Kathy says, this is my brother, Mr. Sloane. He expressed a desire to meet you, and I'd have my back turned. I'd be fixing my tie in the mirror. I'd light a cigarette. I'd turn to face him. I go, I just stared at him for the longest time. This kid, Chris Carmack, played Sloane. He was like an underwear model. And I would light my cigarette, turn, and I go, My sister has told me all about you. My sister was telling me about you. My sister was telling me about you being an orphan, Mr. Sloane. He says, oh, yes. Must have been a rotten life for a kid. You look well on it, though. Like just staring at his ass. You look well on it, though. Well, got all that from Joe. Just stole all that from Joe. And when you do other play, when you do Trump, the lasciviousness, the kind of, the kind of, everything's a little arch. Because it's funny.